biggest thing I hear about in the context of what's the president going to do? What's the president been thinking? Will the president follow through with action? And it's interesting because Donald Trump's been pretty dismissive of MAGA, been pretty dismissive. When Tucker Carlson did a high-profile interview with Steve Bannon, was very critical of the prospect of America getting directly involved with this war, and even aiding Israel the way it's been done, been criticized by some in MAGA. Donald Trump lashed back at his friend Tucker, criticized Tucker. There's also speculation that there are other people in MAGA, maybe even within the administration, who share Tucker's point of view. Tulsi Gabbard, people speculate about. The vice president, people speculate about. I believe that the president is well aware of where MAGA is on this, but he doesn't always side with the far part of MAGA, the isolationist part of MAGA. We've seen him engage in military activity in the past. He believes in speaking loudly and carrying a big stick, but only using it when he thinks it's essential. And as I've said, I think the conditions, if you're someone who believes, as he does, Iran can never have a nuclear weapon. The United States must do everything it can to keep Iran from having a nuclear capability. If you're someone who believes that, like Donald Trump, this is the moment. There's never been a moment like this. The folks in MAGA, you got to respect their principle. You got to respect their point of view. They don't believe that this is in the United States' interest. But what the president is saying when he tells people repeatedly that he's always been resolute, they cannot have a nuclear weapon. What he's saying, in effect, is tell me your plan. Tell me your plan to get rid of Iran's nuclear capability. If I'm not going to seize this moment, what am I going to do? Because negotiation hasn't worked. Israel has engaged historically engaged in extraordinary capability to have human spies on the ground in Iran, to assassinate individual nuclear scientists. It's been incredible. An incredible story of how effective Israel, working with allies, has been in keeping Iran from getting there, slowing down their progress. This has been taking years and years where this has occurred. But the challenge is, again, from the Israeli point of view, time is up. And so you see this confluence. And again, the president sees the confluence. Iran's never been weaker, never been more vulnerable to the kind of attack that Israel's engaged in, that the United States, if they help, makes a big difference. And the urgency has never been higher because Iran is closer, according to the intelligence information that the Israelis have. They've never been closer to having the capability to marry up a nuclear warhead with a missile that can reach Israel and maybe even the United States. That's the moment. That's the reason this consideration for Donald Trump has been so front and center, causing him to leave the G7 meeting, back to the White House, and making a decision that, again, as I say, could be the most momentous decision of his presidency, really the most momentous decision of his life. Because taking out Iran's capability has tons of risks. Talked about some, the possibility of chaos in Iran, backlash from Iran. If they're struck by the United States, they may still have some capability to strike back, although the Israelis have degraded so much of it. But in addition, there's the risk of what happens to the nuclear material. Does it fly all over the Middle East in a way that sickens people and turns a generation of young people against the United States? We really don't know very much about what's going on with public opinion in Iran. There's always speculation that there's a large group of middle class, upper middle class, well-educated folks ready to be part of a new government, ready to be part of taking the country in a new direction. But we don't know that. We don't know that for sure. We worry here that whatever the president is able to do, whatever he chooses to do in a sustained military campaign, if that's the direction of going sustained, what are the implications? No question in my mind that there will be no boots on the ground. There'll be no American forces there, the way we saw in Iraq. And Iraq is the precedent that Tucker and others cite all the time. So how do you keep this from being another Iraq? The most simple one is to say no American forces on the ground, maybe special ops, but no American forces on the ground in any significant numbers, and no attempt to try to shape who's in the government. Now, I think the Israelis will do that. I think the Israelis probably already have a list of people who they think could be in the government. Americans can help another way besides the government, private sector investment. Imagine you've got all these extraordinarily successful business people, many in high tech in the United States, who have Iranian backgrounds, Iranian Americans, who follow closely what happens in their country where their families came from. they could be marshaled. They could be public in saying to the Iranian people, if you get rid of the current government, if your country is open for business again to the West, we can do a lot of business. We can create a lot of wealth in Iran. And that's another appreciation that the president has for the Iranian people, that they are extraordinarily successful historically at commerce, very well educated. And again, the number of successful Iranian business people, I was Googling the other day to look at lists, and it's extraordinary. The number of prominent American business people, some well-known, some not, but who've achieved enormous success at figuring out how do you create wealth in this country. And many of them would be eager to go back to Iran, whether they were born there or not, and help the country change. So there's the possibility that could happen without the United States government doing what it did in Iraq, which everybody recognizes now was a huge mistake. You cannot put American forces on the ground and force people to go in a direction they don't want to go. Would Israel stay there? Probably not. Would the Saudis come in? Who knows? The point is, Iran doesn't have a lot of friends around the world, with the exception of Russia and a few others. And so how do you make this happen? Donald Trump does not want to go to war. He doesn't. He's quite clear about that. And it's one of the things that some of the critics on the left say, he's a warmonger. He doesn't understand the costs of war. He does, although he did not serve himself. Anyone who's had a private conversation with him about these issues, or if you listen to what he says in public, he does not want to go to war. This is a hugely important and risky set of decisions to make. But they're decisions that are made in a very specific context of time and place. Hard to think of that many historical precedents like this, but this is one, as I've said, decades of presidents have said, how do we disarm them? President Obama did a deal. Very close call for a lot of people, whether that deal was good. On the MAGA right, they considered it a failure. But there's only two ways to get this done. And if you're not going to do a deal, then you're going to have to use military action, or you're going to have to deal with the consequences. And Donald Trump will not deal with the consequences. And with Netanyahu, he's got a partner who right now understands the need to be nice to the United States, to be respectful to the president. They haven't always had the best relationship. They had some rockiness after the 2020 presidential election, to be sure. But right now, these are two guys who have a clear understanding of the moment. Netanyahu has been extremely aggressive. And as I said, the backlash has not been that great. I would have expected a significantly greater backlash to what Israel has done. And that is the context in which these presidential decisions are being made. The decision to do what can only be done in the moment and which must be done is a big part of what's animating the president. If Iran backs down, the attacks can stop. But if Iran does not do what it needs to do, Donald Trump, I believe his patience is done. The Israelis' patience is done for sure, but I believe the American president's patience is done as well. This will be resolved. He wants to get it resolved. It's the same attitude he has towards China. Part of what he wants his legacy to be is to solve things that weren't previously solved, both by him in the first term and by other presidents. Other presidents left office, in most cases, with Iran in a stronger position than when they took office. That's not what Donald Trump wants. He wants to put them in a weaker position. And the clearest way to do that is eliminate their nuclear capability and their ballistic missile capability and regime change. Regime change is dicey. And I tell everybody, if you support regime change, you need to be ready to own the possible negative implications of a change in the government. You got to go into it eyes wide open. You cannot go into it rosy colored. And that's a big daunting thing for the president, because he knows full well the negative possibilities. Even if there's no active effort to foster regime change, it could happen indirectly because of American action. And he knows that's happening on his watch.